The sea is warm, everybody's gone. Are you ready for catastrophic?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session, which is a part of 12th edition of Shortwaves Festival and simultaneously a part of industry program of FeKK International Short Film Festival from Ljubljana. I'm extremely happy to welcome my great hosts, which are great speakers, which are in many different countries, simultaneously also at the festival, at the venue. I have here with me Viviana Carlet, founder and art director of Lago Film Festival from Italy, Diana Mereoiu, programmer at Vienna Shorts and distributor at Lemonade Films, Austria, Suzy Gillett, film educator, curator, creative consultant for Film Labs from UK, Anna Sterer, program coordinator of Kino Otok Isla Cinema from Slovenia. We will start this session about a very important subject, film education and community building practices in the pandemic times with the short film medium. But before we will begin the actual discussion, I would like to ask all the speakers to speak very briefly about educational activities that they or their organization run and what is the role of short film as a medium in them. I also encourage you, dear audience, to ask questions, especially at our YouTube stream in the chat box section or at social media of Shortwaves Festival. Right now, I will collect all the questions and address them to our speakers either now or at the end of the session. And let's begin our short introductions from Diana.
So hi everyone, thank you Emilia for having me. I'm really happy to be able to speak about the educational activities at Vienna Shorts. So for almost, I think it's now 6 years, we have had several educational activities aimed mostly at children and teenagers. One is a short film program designed for younger children with short films that would appeal to have like an introduction to the art of short film. Then we have a program made together in collaboration with the Film Museum in Vienna and FeKK Film distribution company in Vienna aimed at young programmers. It's for 17 kids with the ages between 10 and 12 that see a selected 50 short films and under the guidance of professionals then make their own short film program. So they have a bit of an insight into curating and what to look for. And then there's also the youth jury that we invite every year. It's made out of high school teenagers that see the Austrian experimental short films in the Austrian competition and animation avant-garde international competition, and then in the end award the best experimental Austrian film and have to make also a jury statement that's also getting this insight. And apart from this, we had a few years ago a collaboration with Nisimasa for Nisimazin film journalism workshops, where we invited aspiring film critics to the festival, to Vienna for 1 week to watch the competitions and under the guidance of professionals as well to have daily coverage of the short films and interviews. Yeah. So that would be a summary of what we've done.
That's quite a lot, of course. Many different angles. Now, maybe Suzy, could you share with us your practices? Please unmute yourself, Suzy. We cannot hear you.
excuse me, I'll start again. So for the last 5 years, I've been teaching film curating to a group of young, essentially Londoners at the Barbican Centre. And so this is a 7-month course that they sort of arrive in a room usually, and we talk about film. And so it can be feature film, short films. So it's up to them to basically watch films and decide what films that they think they want to put into a film festival that they curate at the end of the 7-month process, which has become, is called the Chronic Youth Film Festival. And so and what has happened is the short films are integral part of the program each year. And what they've been doing is sort of putting a call out and getting young filmmakers to send in their films so that they will be UK premieres, and invite the filmmakers to come along and talk about their films. So it becomes one of the kind of biggest events of the festival in terms of audience, because you've got all the cast and crew come together, and it's like a very celebratory moment. And so it's the idea of young programmers supporting and celebrating young filmmakers at the same time. So it's kind of within a festival that lasts just 2 days, but there's kind of little events that have short films. But we've also had specialist short film programs that have come out, have been curated out of Black cinema or different subject matters. So it's not the kind of, short films is part of the package rather than it being, it's not just a short film festival, but it's for them to learn what it is to curate a feature film and what it is to curate short films, and then what the challenges are around that. So we've been doing that for 5 years in a live space at the Barbican, and this year we're going to have to do it online, so that we can talk about that a little bit later. But so essentially that's my sort of winter job, basically.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we will definitely talk about the challenges that we have to face now just in a minute. But now let's go to next speaker, Viviana. Can you share with us what you do at Lago Film Fest?
Lago Film Fest was born with this objective to be a place of inclusion and dialogue. So really what we do and what we did in these 16 years was through this objectives. For sure, we have a really big focus about kids and teens. So we have different programs for them, and usually what we do are workshops and labs with them, helping them to understand and being critics about films, and giving them tools to understand how it's working to produce or to do a film. And so changing their maybe point of views about, I don't like these drawings, but then understanding how difficult it is, or also doing it. So making short films, animations, or other things. We made also Nizimazin in the past, and what we do is trying to find out many occasions possible to let the people understand how a film is done. So making the morning meetings with all the authors and guests so that they arrive in the festival, and yes, also opening the selection process to as much people as we can. And so it's pretty open. The festival itself was born with this purpose, to give a place where to do things and to try to find out new programs and new projects.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we included both education and community building, because I think those two things are very much connected. Anna, what about you?
Well, our main activity is the International Film Festival. So this means that we include short films and feature films, but film education in its broadest terms is at the core of our festival since the beginning. So 7 years ago, we started to build it really strategically and include it into also other activities. So now we have a children's section for 7 years, in which we include feature and short films, but we focus short films mainly on the youngest age groups of children. And we prepare this kind of also the screenings as events, not just the screenings, so in special kind of also environments and so on. And then we also have a big work with short films within our year-long education projects, which are now mainly a few projects that are done with European partners with the support of Creative Europe Media. So it is this kind of inclusion of short films also in mind of how they can be worked with in terms of their content. So we had one project that actually worked solely with short films.
Okay, thank you very much. As we see, there are like so many different angles and options how to even understand film education, whether it's targeted only to young audience or to also professional audience and filmmakers. But we all have the same core, as I said, community building and some sort of exchange between people, audiences. And that's why my next question will be about, of course, the pandemic situation and this big switch we all had to apply. So could you maybe share with us the biggest difference or the biggest challenge in your work? What happened before and after the pandemic, and how did it influence this year's situation at your festivals? And maybe let's begin with Suzy, because she already gave us a little bit of a hint.
So essentially, the students that I had last year were building up to put on their festival in March. And so a week before their festival, we were in lockdown. And so all the work that they'd prepared was just sort of stopped mid-track. And then what's happened is over this last 5 or 6 months, the Barbican have, rather than cancel the festival, negotiated all the rights with all the rights holders to flip the festival to October and make it a hybrid online and also in the cinema. So there's going to be some films that will be screened in a cinema with great spacing between all the people, and then other films will be online. So this is going to be a kind of great learning curve for all of us, because essentially we've planned a festival that should be taking place in a cinema with all those things, all those meetings happening, and now having to convert all the Q&As to be online, maybe pre-recorded. And so kind of suddenly a group of young budding film curators are going to have to learn what it is to do this kind of panel, to host this kind of event, and contact but at the same time it enables us to contact directors that we had no budget to bring and to invite, so that the conversations are actually going to become more international and more open in a way. So that there's a flip side to everything. So I think we have to look at the positive as well as the sort of disappointment of not having certain things happen in a cinema. But actually having these kind of Zoom encounters means this sort of meeting can take place, which in any other, in many cases wouldn't be possible. So I think that it hasn't happened yet, but we're in the preparatory moment of getting these kind of these conversations planned. So anyway, that's the kind of the live moment of
so this is just gonna happen, so fingers crossed. Diana, your festival Vienna Shorts took place in May. Could you maybe share with us how did you convert your offline activities into the online reality of the online edition?
Yeah, when you asked the question, I just suddenly remembered being at the beginning of March at Tampere Film Festival and talking to a friend, and we were, oh gosh, like this festival has to cancel. I don't remember which we were talking about. And then I said, I'm afraid what will happen to Vienna Shorts? I said, but that one is in May. And it was at that moment, it felt like it will be something that we won't have to deal with at the end of May. And it was quite within 3 weeks, we had to make a decision, cancel, postpone, or go online. And we did go online. And that did change a lot of things, and specifically about film education. For example, I forgot to mention that we also have this artist in residence program, and we've had a guest invited like Reka Bukshi or Peter Millard, Ross Hogg and Duncan Cowles, and they would also sometimes make workshops with younger audiences that they learn a bit of the practical stuff about filmmaking. And for example, this part of our educational activities couldn't happen anymore. We couldn't have artists in residence invited anymore to Vienna for 1 month. And then this also impacted the young programmers segment that we have, which we decided to postpone to autumn, because it would have been 17 kids. Also having them come into the building of the film museum and to get them used to going there to the film museum, to cinema, to introduce it to that space where there are so many educational activities going on. That was something that we were changing decisions about a lot, and then finally thought that autumn will be a safe moment, and hope that this will not change, although things are still uncertain. But it has allowed us, for example, to still have the kids program, and to now, for example, expand it to reach more audiences. Because if before it would only be in one cinema room in Vienna, one cinema place in Vienna, now we invested more money in online marketing and could therefore also screen the films to families basically all over the country that were interested, and thus reach new audiences. And then it was also interesting to see how the young jury managed to live up to the challenge. It was we got really good feedback from them, and they were really just so quick to adapt and still so passionate about it. And it was very, although we had to move online, there was still the sense of vivid conversation and participation. So it's really, although as Suzy also said, although some things are lost, there are a lot of new opportunities, and some, like, the enthusiasm is still there, and some new channels as well.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that there is for sure much of new audiences to explore, but of everything also has both advantages and disadvantages, but we'll also go back to this later. And Viviana, Anna, would you like to also share your experiences?
Yeah, so we understood almost right at the beginning that was in the moment we were really starting making things happen. So in March, and we understood watching China that we were not really able, or we were not really sure to make the festival, even if it was at the end of July. So we tried to focus on something that we were, let's say, sure to do, or to be able to postpone easily. So all the things were concerning, like meeting people, that is like the basis of our festival. So all the performances, the concerts, the meetings, the barefoot industry days, everything was based on this. We were not sure to be able to do, so we said, okay, let's keep this opportunity to rethink all the contents of the festival and change the shape of it. So we focused on cinema only, so only films and competition. So we were sure that we were able, of course, during these months to watch films and to have many moments of exchanging between us. So we were like around 10 people watching films and having a weekly meeting to debate and discuss about this. And what we did, so the good part of this medal, so the positive aspect was that we were really, somehow we were able to make also something more for the cinema aspect, we had only one screen, really big, like 12 meters, that we didn't have before. So it was a really great experience at the end. And we were able to reach all the directors, make interview with them online, of course, but it was a way, somehow it was the year we were able really to talk with all of them, because usually half or 1/3 of the directors arrive to the festival, having in competition 120 films. It's almost impossible to have all of them present live, and so this was a really good moment, also a good tool that we use to help the people to meet and to know more about the films and to have the desire to watch them. And so yes, we had to rethink about how to do all these contents that of course we want to do and we want to continue working, like for example the Sonic Award that is about script writing. We will do it the first weekend of September, and so it's just slightly postponed, but in this way we're creating new projects. So it's not like part of the festival or not before or after the festival, it's simply another project. So the script writing is going to have its own time and space. The same for the art aspect. So we're going to have the body-to-body program at the mid-September. The same with the dance and the performances. So it's how to rethink and how to create somehow new audiences and new spaces, also energy, because in 10 days you can't do too many things, and maybe we were at that point because we were doing really, really too many things. So yeah, this was a good point in this crazy situation.
Well, our festival is just coming up in 5 days because it was postponed from the beginning of June. So our problem, of course, also started with the beginning of lockdown, and we immediately understood that we were actually optimistic for the first 2 weeks that maybe in the beginning of June things will be like nothing happened, and then we realized, okay, that's not going to happen. So we started thinking about alternatives, and because our festival is very dependent on partners, because we don't have our own cinema, we set up a lot of open air locations. So basically it's a very work with municipality and all those people there, because we set it up in a small town, coastal town in Slovenia. So our first thought was, well, obviously we have to have a plan to go online, but we don't want to go to that plan immediately, because that's the easiest plan. You know, you say, okay, we'll go online, let's start working on that, and you are sort of make sure that it happens in any case. At the same time, we knew that this is a really great opportunity to try it. So we said, yes, of course, we'll definitely have some part of it online, but our festival is just also so community-based that, you know, you lose some aspect of it if you don't organize something for people to actually come in person there. So we decided, okay, let's try alternative dates. And in the end, we found this date that is coming up. But the other also new thing was that we placed the screenings on more satellite locations than so far. So basically we partnered with 7 towns in this western region, and we had the screenings since 16th of July, like just separate screenings. So, you know, there was this kind of feeling, okay, film still exists, it didn't die, and we don't want it to die, you know. Come to the screenings, and then we'll have Isola, I mean, this main event in 5 days, which will look very much different than now, but at least, you know, this kind of process of film gatherings will be happening. And then now this is our plan. After Isola, after the main event, we also have screenings in the capital of Ljubljana. And then after that, we will have 1 week of films online. So basically, we're transitioning slowly and trying to keep up some of, this old way of watching films.
Yeah, so many different solutions, and of course, all of us, we have to be highly adaptive in these crazy times, not to stay too attached to what we used to do before. I wanted to ask all of you, just whoever feels like sharing, please share. If you could maybe give me and our audience some of the best examples of online activities, educational activities, which you either participated or organized, and at the same time, the worst ones or the biggest failures, because of course we can share good practices, but also we can very much learn from some sort of bad stories, because I think, we are here to share. So whoever feels like sharing, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I can jump in because we were planning to do a 2-day workshop that was a kind of new thing, that was also to sort of do an open call and get new curators to come and then offer some kind of workshop and do a lab, and then the cinema at the Barbican was going to put on their events. And then we had to flip that into becoming an online workshop. And so I had this kind of weird thing where you have to just suddenly spread the time that normally in 2 days you can have conversations and things can happen and people meet each other. And suddenly to do this over, what we did was to do it over 4 mornings. And then you realize you do a sort of very tight schedule and everybody's meeting and you're doing these little breakout rooms. And what I didn't program into that schedule was the kind of coffee bar moment where you're just relaxed and you're just chatting to your neighbor randomly because you've come to the coffee bar at the same time. And so what you lose in this kind of very highly structured, looks very efficient on paper, is the downtime of these kind of collective moments. And so I think that somehow to work into these online sessions is, how do you create that downtime space so that people feel that they've had a meeting or that they've somehow had because to just spend time being lectured at, or like workshops are kind of work in a multiple way where you're kind of having an exchange with all the different people. So I think that for me was a kind of learning curve where I made a big mistake in the scheduling of downtime, and how do you do that? So that's my kind of
So maybe we do have to invent somehow like a coffee break with a random meeting, you have to talk with this, because this is happening when you are having a coffee with someone that maybe you just start talking because you're just close to him or her. And of course, online, you're not going to start to talk with someone like randomly. So this could be a good idea that we can use in online meeting. No, I hate online meeting when it's from 8 in the morning till 10 p.m. So at the end of the day, it's like you don't remember how many people you met during the day because it's always in your room. So you don't have even like a different landscape, even a different environment. But I had really good experiences on meeting other people that maybe usually you don't have the time to meet. So just talking and saying, oh, what are you doing? Because I don't know what to do, or what you're thinking, or people that were asking me if I had more information. So like, no, sorry. But it was cool because otherwise in other circumstances, you're not going to talk or so much, or going deeply inside also in some technical aspects, or also content aspects, or also like this kind of inquiry about how to create a specific program for education, or to create new audiences, or how it's changing the audience. Because if you do a festival nowadays, a physical one, let's say, you know that you're going to have a kind of community that is really close to your town somehow, or close in your region. And so it's different that if you have normally like an international audience coming to the festival. So it's changing also the program, the way you choose the films. and also this is a good challenge.
Actually, you reminded me when you said this. I mean, we had one really good experience with young audience. We have a Young Audience Award in Slovenia. We organize it. This is the award for the best film of young children. So this was this year at the end of April. And usually, of course, it's we have them in the cinema. They apply beforehand. It's 100 seats in the cinema, and then they have to somehow organize by themselves how to come there. So some of them are locals, and then you have a few schools that bring them. And this year, we realized, okay, we're still doing it, but how do we do it? So the way it was set up, it was already, there was a 4-day slot of watching films, and then at the end they're voting. So what we did in the beginning was already issue an open call for all the country, and in the end we really got we got 124 applications of kids from all the country, which would never happen if we had just physical location. And because we realized, okay, there's a big interest and we want to offer something additional besides just watching the films, we set up Zoom meetings after each film for like an hour. And we just set up like one meeting and sent them all a link. We said it's like obligatory to join. But it was like 100 kids joined every day. So,
Wow.
So it's just
cool.
like a little bit, a small number that didn't.
No,
It
it was
was
a huge number, 100 people,
Yes, and in the beginning we thought, okay, this is probably not going to work because it's too many kids. It should be like separate small groups. But in the end, I think that actually worked good because you have a lot of kids that just are too shy to talk. Sure. So they had an option to just follow the conversation. We had one moderator, and then a lot of kids that actually really wanted to talk. And then you would see, they're just sitting there at home following the conversation and trying to add their thoughts. So it was this realization that kids just really miss having the interaction between themselves, and this was a nice interaction. And they had, of course, the chat option there to add some comments, so they were all writing all the time. So it was this kind of a nice community moment.
Now that sounds beautiful, really. Wow.
It was surprising to us that it works, in the virtual world. So yes, so far no bad experience yet because we didn't have that many online events.
Anyone else want to add something?
I think I wanted to add about, well, it's not necessarily an educational it has an educational aspect to it, but the Q&As that you would have at the end of a screening. And one thing that I have not considered is just online fatigue sometimes, that Q&As were so imbalanced sometimes. And because we have had the Q&As with the directors where they got some questions from us, but then they also had the opportunity to get questions in our chat app from the audience. And sometimes it was also because we did it online that somehow we had so much space to do a lot of things that I'm thinking, and they were quite unevenly attended, some of them. This is something that then I thought about, that this is not, in the beginning it was nice to go online and talk to people, but then I wondered, is there this sort of content fatigue as well, and festival and activity fatigue when everything is going online? Mm-hmm. And I think it was this aspect about Q&As as well, which it just depends so much on circumstances, and I think it's a bit hard to control. I don't really know what would be, I don't know when it worked, why it worked so well, and when it didn't work as well, why exactly it happened, but this was one thing. that it's a bit more difficult from my point of view to incite this sort of discussion because when you're in the cinema, although maybe it's just the international community and then the local community can attend, but sometimes there are a couple of brave people that start the conversation, and then someone else picks up the courage to speak up, although they might have had that question in their mind, but they were a bit shy. And it's just this, I think that this sort of getting a bit of bravery to participate is something that I don't know exactly how to, not necessarily a bad practice, but like maybe a struggle or a challenge.
Yeah, you all mentioned the perspective of creators, but also the perspective of the audience. And of course, the online reality creates for us, in theory, endless opportunities to reach different audiences, also those who, for many different reasons, are not able to attend the events in person. But do you see also some risk in putting your activities online? Do you see some, for instance, group of audience that is easily just disappearing? Or any other challenges which are the part of the online education process?
If I can oh, sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, go ahead.
I really, I was very surprised. It's not necessarily related to just about the educational practice, but the festival attendance, that people were watching, well, not all of them, of course, but watching the films on their phones, on their mobile phones. And it's not to be like a purist, like cinema should only be enjoyed on the big screen, but just to at least a decent display to notice a bit more, and just to be able to not be so easily distracted when 1/3 of your screen suddenly has a pop-up notification that someone liked your cat video on Instagram. I think that this was very strange for me. Sorry, you wanted to say something, Suzy?
Yeah, it was just the question we had when I was talking with my students was how do you sort of find your audience if they're all online and you're now the films are going to be put on for 10 days. How do you get that kind of collective moment where you've gathered together and you're watching a film together, and then there's some kind of shared experience, and how do you create that online community essentially? So that's in a way so there's, yes, the watching the film is one thing on, it's not ideal watching it on whatever, even a laptop, it's not very good, but then it's how do you feel like you've shared something with a group of other people that you've discovered this film, and so it's that sort of bit of the festival that I'm sort of worried about in a way. It's like how do you feel like you've met your audience, so that when there's a physical festival, that all that excitement of sharing is just not there.
Well, I think also that there are different aspects. So on one side, the digital divide, that is not everybody can use a laptop, not everybody can use internet or has internet.
Yeah.
Where I live, where I work, it's not a capital, it's not a big city, it's a countryside. There's not the high quality, high speed internet. It's to watch a film, it's like a disaster. So this is the real problem, and not everybody has access in the same way. Yes, to the technologies. And on the other hand, when you talk about like which is my audience, or somehow it's also easier because it's really target. And so you're I don't know, you're showing something, or you want to find out like a class dedicated to a specific topic. Somehow online is easier because you have many tools. With Facebook you can reach 10, 20, 100 people, and it's pretty easy. on one side, but on the other side, it's not that everybody has a Facebook profile or use the Facebook as a tool like every day. So I always, because I'm the oldest one in my organization, so sometimes I say, if I don't have Facebook, how can I know about the festival? You know, like, and this is the real problem, I think, also when you create new audiences. And so finding out also other tools or other ways to give the possibility to access to your content and to your programs, or help in also the education in this way, that it's not really so easy. That is something that maybe not even we have the capacity and of course the possibility or the power to do this, but this is the real problem. So also, like, I know that many people that works in the schools now, the gap is bigger. If when you were in the school, in the classroom, you were able to take some guys, some people that they were like, or too shy, now they are disappearing because they don't, they are not able maybe to switch on the microphone and speak and say what they want. So being part of something online on some site, it could be really interesting and helpful for some people, but for others that they don't have really the tools or the ability to use them, it's a really huge gap.
That sounds pretty scary, but I hope that also us as film educators, or any educator now, in a way, has to become a kind of online expert. This is also for us, people who work with this medium. It's also quite a challenging time to all of a sudden be able to be a Zoom expert or online etiquette expert. And this definitely will come with the time, I hope, that we will be able to connect with the audiences we want. But maybe on a more positive note, I'm very curious, what would you think of if I would ask you to imagine that you have absolutely unlimited budget, time, and human resources, and very stable internet connection, of course. What would you construct as your kind of dream educational activity for either audience or filmmakers in this crazy pandemic times, or even without it? Do you have any big plans ahead that you could share, even if it's just wishful thinking?
You know, when I read that question, I immediately imagined bringing people together, a collective moment, a journey, or something like that. But that's like no longer possible. So I'm kind of still stuck in this moment of like, oh my God, how do you, this online world? But I think it's more about connecting people in the, so if you take away the geography of those physical meetings, and then the expansion then of international connections. So it's more like a kind of Facebook, that Facebook community that you can kind of create, where you bring people together who you've never met, but you have these kind of random connections, and then you're having some kind of exchange. So I think that there's that there is a possibility of kind of expansion and of those connections. So I think that it's something like that I would be thinking of. So, but it's not very formulated.
Well, when you asked this, my first thought was something that we are wanting for a long time, but is the opposite of online, progress. It's to have our own cinema. We don't have a cinema. We are always, somewhere at the partner's premises. So it's been our big dream, how many programs we can do with the cinema. So it's funny, that of course we're thinking all the time about this, how can we be better online? How can we communicate with our audience? But it keeps coming back to, okay, but we are missing the cinema so much. So sometimes I feel like when these debates are happening, or all of these events and everything, we are also heading into this new digital direction. We're trying to cope with it, understand it, be as the best as possible. That sometimes I get afraid that what if we forget that we need to start telling that cinema is really important, because then it comes up to policymakers, decision makers, that will just say, okay, if you can do anything online, go ahead, and then we will be left in the situation where, oh yes, well, now what, So I'm just worried about this part, that because we will try so hard to be, so well connected with our program and our audience, that we that somehow this physical part will be neglected, and they will just say, yes, well, we can do without it,
Maybe Diana or you, Viviana, do you have some dreams which are not so physical but also maybe online with your educational activities, or are we all somehow really missing the old vibe we could have created?
Viviana, do you want to go first, or should?
Okay, go.
I think with unlimited budget, I would just so much like to expand this, that it's not just an activity that we do during the festival for 17 teenagers, but that it even gets to the point where it doesn't have to be something that we do, but that we somehow manage to set up an infrastructure that teachers can use it for their classrooms, whether they teach history or foreign languages, that they use, especially short films. I think that they're very good in their very economical form, and that they, because of the production process taking so much less time than a feature, that they can also react to things that are important and feel like current and pressing events for the young generation. And I think that would be my utopia, that there could be an infrastructure of just giving the tools, giving resources for people to apply these digital means, but in their, also in still it would be nice in the classroom, and this community feeling. I just see everyone is so starved for actual connection, and I can't see this going away. I can see maybe policymakers not really understanding necessarily the sentiment on the ground or in the field, so to say. But yes, it would be great to just be able to bring this closer to more educators. And
so if I understood you correctly, you would like to work on a bigger scale also with like formal education or schools on each level. This brings me to the question, if any of you actually has this good connection. I know that at least Suzy, she also teaches at a university, but what about other educational institutions which are already existing in your countries? Do you have any like good connection with them? Do they use your expertise also in some sort of multimedia education, or is it again, as very often, that there is the formal education in the cities or countries, and then there are us, independent curators, educators, working separately, or maybe there is a bridge that you can describe?
So for example, for us, we have several connections, but it's more like, for example, we have the academy, the Tuscany Academy, and it's already 3 or 4 years that the students are coming during the summer, and they do things lively with us. So they start doing like the direct online, or they record, they do films that, yes, they just practice. They don't use us as a, like a, let's say, like archival tools that they can use to know this. But I think this could be a really good a good point. As also Diana said, I'm more analog, so I do have to use the digital instrument as a tool. So if I'm thinking about, I'm not able to think a digital dream, let's say, but I'm more, or online dream, but I'm more trying to use the online as a tool to do what we do in an analog way. So it was always a dream for me to create a cultural center that has all these aspects. And I think that having an online, let's say, cultural center is creating new networks and new possibilities also under the educational point of view. As Diana said, you don't have just 10 days in a year when you screen films, and then maybe you have like a focus somewhere in another festival, or you do something in some school. But if you structure this, that you do this in your like little school in your village, and then in all the network of the schools that they are all together, and then, as you said, with other huge also universities, or for example, a professor asked me to give him some films about architecture. That is he's like an historic professor of architecture, but it's not so common, and maybe using internet is really helpful also to reach this and to be able to use and to give more visibility to the short films. So it's not that the short film is just going to several festivals during 1 year and then you put it online, but then you give path or like instrument to other people or other institution to use, like for example, thematic screenings, or really using the short films to explain political situations, to explain landscape in South America, or so. Yes, this, I think this could be really my dream, but it was already like this also before. I just add a tool to this, and yes, that's it.
Yeah.
One, sorry, you want to go?
It was just, it's just comment about, because one of the things I was sort of thinking about short films prior to this meeting was also the way that I've observed people creating little films. Instead of doing a lecture, somebody might make a film, and then that's what they're presenting it as a sort of digital lecture, rather than being in a room with students. They then make a film, and so somehow short films are being kind of used in another way, in this kind of educational way, as a tool then that's kind of bypasses the being in the room and giving a lecture. And so you're kind of being more creative with what it is you're giving to your audience, and then these things then sort of stay on the internet as something that are much more accessible. So I wasn't in the university lecturer to hear this talk, but suddenly I can be part of that conversation. So I think there's a kind of opening up of things that were before happening in rooms or in universities or in these private spaces, which suddenly are becoming much more democratically shared. And so, I mean, so I think that's quite interesting, that you've got short films that are becoming tools that then are being used in a way that aren't, there are outside festivals. It's not, these things aren't existent for a kind of, you know, short film audience. It's like, this is something that somebody's used as a creative way to talk about a subject that they're passionate about. So I think there's a kind of and they're not really, they're like hybrid film, lecture, podcasty things, but I think that there's something quite interesting in that form.
You can also reach remote places, you know, like, because if it's easier, for example, in a capital or in a big city, outside it's not really so easy to watch film, to meet the directors, to have discussions or debate, as we are doing here, for example.
And so Spike Lee did a film, and then there was Ashley Clark is a critic who lives in New York, and he did a little Q&A with the three of them on Zoom, and suddenly it's like, I can watch that. I couldn't be in the cinema, And so you have this, and then it exists as a short film, essentially. It's like a conversation that took place. So I think, you know, and even if this is then a conversation that takes place, and there may be some useful things, but yeah, just, I mean, to go back to the thing about cinema, I think that cinema for me, having spent my entire life watching film in a cinema, because at my age there was no other way, that I can remember a film because I saw it in the cinema, but I cannot remember a film if I've watched it on a computer. So it's like the memory of cinema that is in my head are all the films that I saw in the cinema. But my memory of some TV series or anything that I've watched online on a computer, I can't remember. So there's a kind of physical aspect to that knowledge base that I built up over, you know, decades. It's like I'm losing that ability now because I'm watching things on a laptop. And so I think that's very, very, very dramatic in a kind of for educational purposes, that if a film marks you because you saw it when you were 17 in cinema and that changed your life, that we're not going to have those moments anymore if we're only watching it on a computer screen on your own, and you don't have that, you know, physical resonance that you carry with you for the rest of your life. And so I think that's quite dramatic, and that it's very hard to articulate that to policymakers, as you're saying, about the importance of cinema, of carrying memory of a film inside your head. So I think that's something kind of it's quite physical, and it's quite hard to sort of, but I think that for me, that's kind of, you know, my life learning is the films that I saw in the cinema are vitally important to me and are integrated literally into my being, and the things that I'm seeing on a TV screen, you know, don't matter, and they don't have the same resonance, however important the film is. So I just saw it as my little lecture about how, you know, it's like a kind of incredibly difficult situation not to be able to go to the cinema.
But for me, you also pointed to just this potential of hybrid solutions to cinema and to festivals, to educational activities, because you could have the physical experience and then the memory, just experience maybe a film in the cinema room and on the big screen, but then also, as you said, the Zoom calls with Spike Lee that would then get accessible. And I think that this sort of weird situation that we all found ourselves in just also brought a really interesting solution to this hybrid solution. And that also has, I mean, of course, storing stuff online and internet has its own carbon impact, but this was also something that I really wanted to briefly mention, because you were saying, Amelia, about the program with the Extinction Rebellion that you're going to have, that this is also, I'm using insider information from before the talk, but that this is also, you get to speak to more filmmakers and not have to fly someone in over across the Atlantic to do so. And I think that's also something really good to keep.
Also because I think it's going to stimulate also the meeting after. So it's not that we all know that, of course, the physical meeting. So we are really happy because after this, we can have a coffee together, really. But somehow all these tools are really good to stimulate also a meeting after, or also to higher the level of quality, because you know that also when you work with kids or other people, like with educational program, you need to take in consideration the level of attention. So you have to be really, as you said before, you know, like the schedule cannot be as in person. So I hope, and what we have also to remember when we do this kind of thing is remembering the quality of what we do, the quality of the people we stimulate, and to make it like shorter as possible and not taking like 3 hours because too much. And yes, use this to stimulate after also other meetings and another possibility of exchange ideas and talk as we're doing here.
Yeah. I just want to very quickly remind our audience, whoever is watching, that you can ask us questions, because of course we could go on for a really long time. But if there are any questions from our audience, now it's the time to write them either on our YouTube chat box or at live Facebook stream. But before any questions will arise, I want to ask you a very last question from my side, because we focus quite some on educational aspects of our work. But I want to quickly jump into the community building aspect, which was, of course, floating around, but we never really put any emphasis on it. And I wanted to ask you if you also see some new trends or tendencies in either event production or education activities, how to actually online or offline bring people together. Just to begin, I can give you a short story that I heard recently, and I found it really interesting. That some people who are also organizing film events, they told me that they are tired of this overproduced, overthought film events, this festival format, which is so much about the production value, all the trailers, making this whole experience in the end very stressful for the people who are attending, and that there is much more of DIY vibe happening. For instance, just a very last example, instead of having a professional host at the Q&A session, just to give a microphone to the audience and say, I'll be back in 20 minutes, and now talk to the filmmakers on the stage. I know it's quite radical what I'm saying, but how do you feel about that? Do you also experience approach of this kind, or anything else which is something new in comparison to what was happening, let's say, 10 or 5 even years ago?
I don't know if we're there yet, but that sounds like a brilliant idea. Just very democratic. Take out the expert. So.
I would be really stressed out if I was in the audience, so I got the microphone. But I was thinking that in the last few years, there's already so many, like also with Vimeo curating channels, with also sites dedicated to this. Also, a lot of festivals are just sharing short films on their social media platforms. And I see this more and more in a lot of festivals. Of course, I don't know exactly what audiences are being reached. But I was thinking it now has become so normal for me to see like Shortwaves and Vienna Shorts and FeKK, to see that they are sharing short films that maybe I would not have watched it on our online to be seen by everyone on Vimeo, because they've already completed their circuit, their festival circuit. And I think that this is actually a really, like for a short film, I think it's a really great way to distribute short film and make it more popular. And now we don't have to feel sad that they're not being shown before feature films in cinema anymore.
I mean, Wim Wenneke, and there was an Italian guy, they were sharing once a month a short film in Shorts We Trust during the whole lockdown. And it was incredibly moving. They were very beautifully curated. And then one a week or something like that, there would be on the Facebook, there would be the short film. So I watched more short films in that period because somebody had very carefully curated one film, and I was just getting this lovely feed of things. So that, for me, it was very moving that somebody was taking the time to do that and creating this kind of lockdown festival worldwide for whoever wanted to spend the time watching these short films. I think, you know, it's an incredibly powerful thing to do, for that thinking to happen. And so for me it was, yeah, really, really beautiful.
Jana, Anna, you want to share something?
You're saying something.
Any new tendencies or trends in event management or educational profiles?
We're just exploring now.
Yeah.
So in the terms of educational aspect, we also have one project where we have online tools for film education with exercises and so on. So we offered this to teachers during the pandemic, and there was a lot of response. The only thing I would add to this is that it seems that it's really important to be actively involved throughout the process with the teachers, because at some point it just comes to the fact that, you know, either they don't know technically enough or they lose interest because they would have to engage more. So, you know, it would somehow be necessary to be more involved throughout the whole process than maybe before, when you could physically come somewhere and make a lecture or explain something, and you know they would understand. So that's one thing. And then another about any concept, I mean, about community, about something that some new approaches. Well, so far we have the best response. I mean, where if we screen in villages, you know, it's much more active engagement from the audience in the conversations, you know. I don't know if it is because of villages, because, you know, they feel more at home and comfortable there than audience that you gather from very different environments. But it can turn into similar to what you were describing, you know, that they start talking to each other, that they're not just passively listening to Q&A, you know, in front of the screen. But in connection to these new digital times, I don't think we have that experience yet, and we will be going into experience now, you know, just.
I think that the people and the audience itself, like us, we are so searching for this kind of moment of exchanges that the people are also more also the level of attention is really high, because they want to be there and they want to attend the festival, they want to meet the director, to listen to the world, and so I had this sensation that there's more, the level of attention is really high, not only in villages, because we made several screenings, of course, but because maybe they are already a community, but it's also like a personal sensation that I have. So for example, what we did, we divided into 3 communities, let's say, that they are our community of reference. And for example, the first community, it's us. So for the team itself, what we did during the festival, since we can't have guests, we produced a program of education, that we invited some guests, some teachers, some interesting people to talk with us. And what we did was working on the festival and on the next years. So what I think this moment gave us is the push to think wider and to think in another way. So this is really a good occasion, okay, but also a good excuse. Otherwise, before it was not possible to say, we're not going to do the concerts, we're not going to do this kind of things, because why stop it? You can't. So now it's a good excuse to really to think about what you want to do, how you want to reach your audience, how you want to also include them in the process. And it was really great. So also the team itself, that this year was also like less people taking part actively in the festival, but they are like now all of them, they are new like project managers of a defined area. Or for example, we decided to give to other 3 people the art direction of the festival, and they are super excited about this. And it's really a new exchanging moment, and also an excuse of growth, that it's the sensation is really good. So this community, the small community who is living for the festival, with the festival, and also the other community that is like, for us, it's the closer community that is also hosting the festival, the villages itself. And in these years, they really were able to understand and to end really in the cinema world, and of course then the people from abroad, so using more like internet and other tools that we had. But let me start talking.
Okay. Because unfortunately, we don't have any questions from our audience. We probably should next time do it more DIY and somehow force them to join. Then I really want to ask you very, very final question, but let's maybe end this session with, of course, some sort of look into the future. So very, very briefly, because the time is definitely running, we already talk longer than expected. If you could very briefly say, what do you think about the future of the film education? I know Viviana really said quite some about the options, but do you think it's gonna be more local or more global or a mixture of both? Final round, final note.
For me, both, because I can't think like only a local program or local program of the education. So we have this kind of tool that I think that what we do is different from your festival, from the other festivals, that it's so great to be able to talk together and to exchange also different experiences, but also different different strategies. So I can do something about the environment and you something about politics, and so together we can be also more powerful to reach the universities, to reach other audiences. So yes, I think it has to be both, because it has to be, for example, it depends also on the festival, but my festival that is strictly connected with a place that is hosted, that is an open area, that is nowadays it's like the patio of the village, so every year they wait for this. You can't really not think about it, but when you think about the local, you're thinking in a global way, because nowadays for us I think it's normal thinking about Europe as our home, and so yes, I can't have a program of education about Lago that has only 1,000 people. And of course, I would like that all the kids of 7 years can do this kind of workshop with this animator. So yes, I think global is definitely the answer.
Well, I mean, I think in the latest years, global aspect has been really well developing. So I am hoping that it will stay this way, because what it made a lot of difference to our local environment, that we could be globally connected, and then you just use these global influences for the local environment. So I don't know about the future, but I'm really hoping that it will sort of continue this course.
Diana, what's your prediction? Or Suzy, who wanna share next?
Go ahead, Diana.
All right. Well, I think that it would, or I like a lot the idea that it will be local, in the sense that it will bring, it will involve actually even more people from the community, and that perhaps there would be more focus on, for example, regional filmmakers or national filmmakers, that there's a bit more connection, even more connection with the audiences in this way. For example, because, in a country like Romania, where I'm from, where there's very little cinema infrastructure, I think that this would be a great way to somehow compensate for the infrastructural lacks that we have, to build community in this way. But I very much believe that you can't, even when you do something for yourself, you can't do it on your own, and that there's so many great practices that you can learn from other places. And even just in this panel, we've heard, as many as all of you have said, there are so many different approaches, and I can't learn something on my own. And this conversation, this sort of, if I do something locally, I will still be networking with everyone and be part of a larger system of local activities. I think local in the sense of engaging with communities and involving and trying to bridge these barriers of infrastructure and technological technological means that might be lacking or not, and just try to develop the community around you in this sense, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to answer, because essentially when you said, Viviana said Europe, it was like a stab in the back, because we're about to become this kind of strange island. We're already a strange island, but we're going to become this kind of isolated space. So I think the whole thing and my work for the last several decades has been connectivity, especially with Europe and beyond. And so I think that here we're going to have to amplify that work and increase the kind of connectivity, so that we don't feel that we're kind of even more isolated. So I think that there's a sort of while just after lockdown, there was this kind of Black Lives Matter moment in the UK, and it was like so powerful that there felt like this huge new wave of young, politically engaged, like a kind of wave of change. And so I had to kind of, basically there is hope that, and it's like, maybe it's for people like me to move over and give the space away. So, you know, it's like kind of, for me, it was a big question about what am I doing here? What am I doing with my work? But basically all my work has been to bring up the next generation and to get the new voices in a solid space where they feel that they're able to do their stuff. And so there's a group of women that I taught like at the beginning in the first group that I had, who are now a collective, who are sort of really coming forward. They're doing incredible short film programming. So in a way, my work is done. And so I feel like it's a kind of transmission of the generations to the next generation. And I think there's a kind of, this country has not got to the bottom of how bad it's going to get. And so there needs to be even more work of cultural, you know, necessity to open us up to the wider world. So I think that, you know, it's a kind of cry of help, basically, to get everybody on getting their energy together to move us into a connectivity. So anyway.
So you can't stop now. You have to continue what you did. I think that what we do is working without boundaries, without countries limits, or without political limits. And so I think that is it's really good for what we do. So even if there's some political position changes, it's not changing at all our work. So, or better, as you said, is going also more more deeply inside. So please continue.
Yeah. Yes, let's hope so. Let's stay positive that despite the pandemic, all the global tensions in politics and economy, because I expect a huge economical crisis in next years, which of course will also hit us, the film educators, film curators. But let's stay positive. This is our role.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I think we have run out of time. Thank you very much for being here with me and with audience of both Shortwave Festival in Poland and in Ljubljana as well. I wanted to also thank Peter Czerowczak and Tania, who also helped us to put this session together, and invite you, the speakers, and of course for your time, your experience. I hope you enjoyed the session, and that we will continue this long conversation about film education. This is not our last word, I believe. So yeah. Thank you very much. Next session of Shortwave Festival Industry Program Online. Tomorrow we're gonna have a talk about film criticism, so very linked to the film education. If anyone is interested, feel free to join us. It's gonna be again online, again on our FilmTube platform and on Facebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.